"I regretted all my life for not marrying Diane." This sentiment reportedly encapsulates Al Pacino's deepest personal failure. The act of letting go of the one individual who inspires a desire for permanence is often viewed as an irretrievable mistake. For decades, Pacino has captivated audiences with unforgettable performances, deeply layered characters, and a fiercely independent spirit. Yet beyond his public achievements, one question has persistently lingered. Why has one of Hollywood's preeminent legends never married? At the age of 85, following the passing of Diane Keaton, Pacino finally provided a candid answer. Throughout his life, Pacino had relationships with many women, from celebrated movie stars to gifted artists. His heart, however, truly belonged to only one Diane Keaton. The actress who portrayed Kay Adams in The Godfather was not merely a co-star. She was the singular love that would haunt Pacino for the remainder of his life. A single moment of weakness, an involvement with another woman, while he was still profoundly in love with Diane, resulted in a devastating mistake. This transgression, which led to the birth of a child with John Tarrant, ultimately cost him the only woman who ever truly understood him. It presents a stark paradox that a man desired by millions could experience such profound, isolating loneliness. This narrative seeks to explore the story behind this regret and the hypothetical question of whether Pacino, if able to reverse time, would have dared to secure his relationship with Diane Keaton. One of the most intriguing choices in Al Pacino's life has always been his decision never to marry. After decades under the dazzling spotlight through intense roles, health battles, and behind-the-scenes struggles, his life remained a mystery. At 85, Pacino finally spoke softly, thoughtfully, about the real reason behind that decision. He admitted that there had once been a woman he could never forget. A woman whose memory lingered painfully through the years. There was even a time when he came close to marriage. "I almost did it," he said slowly. "But then I stepped back." In his memoir, Sonny Boy Pacino once wrote that he avoided marriage because he didn't want to board the train of pain. But between those cautious words, readers could sense something more. Regret. Regret for not holding on to the woman who first awakened his heart. Perhaps that was when Pacino began to live by his own rule. Love, but don't bind. He never rejected love. He simply stopped believing marriage could bring anything better. When speaking of love, Pacino couldn't hide the nostalgia. "I have loved deeply," he once said, "and I missed what could have been everything." A close friend revealed that some nights Pacino would sit silently for hours, staring out the window of his Beverly Hills home, the city lights reflecting on a face that had lived too long in brightness, yet carried the sadness of shadows. Time passed. He kept living, kept loving. Women came and went, but none stirred his soul the way the first one did. When asked by reporters, he simply replied, "I don't think loving anyone matters anymore. I once had the chance to marry, and I let it go." His voice, rough, low, sounded half like a confession, half like closure. At 85. Let's look back at the long list of Al Pacino's lovers to find that one name. The woman he forever regretted not having. One Jill Clayberg. The first public love in 1967, when Al Pacino was still a young, ambitious actor, struggling with small stage roles in New York. He met Jill Clayberg, a girl just beginning her artistic journey. They met during an audition for an off-Broadway play where the lights were dim and the audience barely filled the seats. Both were young, full of dreams, and burning with the desire to be seen, to be heard, to become someone. Their love blossomed amid late-night rehearsals, cheap wine, and long talks about grand ambitions. They quickly became one of New York's most beloved theater couples. People said that when they were on stage together, they didn't need a script. Their glances told the story. Clayberg once said Pacino was a man who lived for art and only for art. And perhaps that's what drew her in. Pacino, still finding his place, found comfort in Jill. Someone who understood the hopes and insecurities only a young actor could feel. They lived together in a tiny Manhattan apartment, shared dreams of the future, and believed love and art could coexist. But like many young artists, romance's passion can burn bright and burn everything down. As Pacino's fame skyrocketed after The Godfather, the line between ambition and reality began to appear. Jill still struggled to find her footing, while Pacino was pulled into the whirlwind of fame and pressure. "Two actors living together is ridiculous," Jill later said. "One goes to Detroit, the other to Minnesota. You both get tired and no one has the energy to listen." The distance between them was no longer physical. It was emotional. By 1972, as Pacino's name lit up Hollywood, their 5-year romance quietly ended. There was no big fight, no dramatic goodbye, just silence and a long emptiness that lingered in both lives. Jill later admitted, "I went through it all, hating myself, hating him. Pain, anger, fear." Pacino rarely spoke of that love, but those close to him said it left a mark. The kind of ache you feel when you know you lost something vital and it's too late to fix it. Some said Jill Clayberg was the first woman who made Al Pacino think about marriage, but he never did it. Maybe because he knew in his world, marriage was a promise he couldn't keep. In a later interview, when asked why he never married, Pacino just smiled. "I once loved deeply, but some things, if done too late, no longer feel right." Many believed he was talking about Jill. 2. Marta Keller, The Fragile Affair. Before fame reached its height, Al Pacino had a fleeting romance with Swiss actress Marta Keller. They met in 1977 while filming Bobby Deerfield, a philosophical love story, directed by Sidney Pollack. On set in Europe, amid the melancholy of racetracks and quiet introspection, the two young actors found something intense, yet delicate, as if the movie itself had written their destiny. It was said that even when the cameras stopped rolling, they kept talking. Sometimes in silence, sometimes with knowing glances. Keller once said, in a rare interview, "My feelings for Al were my own. To speak of them feels like undressing my soul." For 2 years they lived between two worlds, Hollywood and Europe, fame and solitude. Pacino was glowing from The Godfather in Dog Day Afternoon, while Keller was being praised in both French and American cinema. They loved each other with an artist's understanding, and were torn apart by it too. Between flights, filming schedules, and roles that demanded they become other people, their love grew fragile like a scene repeated too many times. Beautiful, but no longer real. By 1979, they went their separate ways. Keller returned to Europe embracing theater and opera, while Pacino stayed in Hollywood, his stars still rising. And it was there in Hollywood that Pacino met the woman he would never forget. The name carved deep in his heart. Diane Keaton. 3. Diane Keaton, the woman Pacino regretted not marrying. Al Pacino and Diane Keaton met in the early 1970s while filming The Godfather. Diane played Kay Adams, gentle, rational, while Pacino embodied Michael Corleone, cold and powerful. Their on-screen relationship soon bled into reality. Behind the tense scenes, Keaton fell for Pacino. She once said that from the first moment she saw him, "I went crazy for him." He was impossibly beautiful, funny, and so intelligent. Their love wasn't loud. It was deep quiet, like a current running beneath the surface. They came together as two lonely souls who understood each other in a world of glamour and isolation. Pacino admitted that Keaton was the one who made him feel seen. She made him laugh, made him calm, and made him face himself. Despite their strong personalities, they found a rhythm passionate yet fragile. But there was always a distance between them. Diane longed for a home. Pacino feared commitment. She once hoped he'd propose just once, but it never came. Pacino was consumed by career and freedom. "I didn't need a proposal," she said. "I just thought maybe one day he would marry me, but that day never came." Finally, she gave him an ultimatum. "Either marry me or we're done." Pacino stayed silent, and so it ended. Still, they kept their affection and respect, a love incomplete but real to the core. When The Godfather Part 3 ended in 1990, so did their relationship. Diane walked away. Pacino stayed silent. Years later, he still couldn't forget her. In interviews, his eyes always softened when he spoke of her. "She's the most extraordinary woman I've ever met," he said. "And maybe the biggest mistake of my life was not marrying her." After losing Diane Keaton, the only woman he truly considered marrying, Pacino, seemed to shut his heart to marriage. That love left a void nothing could fill. Diane saw the man behind the legend, a lonely soul afraid of bonds, yet yearning for love. When their love ended, so did his belief that love and an artist's life could coexist. From then on, Pacino chose solitude. No one ever reached the place in his heart where Diane once lived. The women who followed Beautiful Famous were fleeting shadows in his long, lonely journey. He once said, "I've loved, but no one made me want to marry the way she did." When Diane Keaton passed away, those close to Pacino said he was devastated. He disappeared from public view, locked himself in his room, refusing calls or condolences. A close friend recalled Pacino sitting in silence, staring at old photos of the two of them from The Godfather, whispering, "If only I hadn't let her go." Not marrying Diane is the greatest regret of my life. The pain wasn't just from losing a friend. It was from knowing he had lost the greatest love he ever had. In every iconic role he's played, Pacino still found traces of Diane in glances, in unfinished lines. To him, Keaton wasn't just a co-star. She was the woman who taught his heart how to love and how to regret. To Pacino, Diane wasn't just a lover, but a chapter of his life he could never rewrite. After her passing, he said in a brief interview, "I think there are people who come into your life, and you know you'll never meet another soul like them again." Perhaps that was one of the rare times he spoke of her publicly, softly yet hauntingly. What do you think of this tragic love story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Yet another reason why Keaton broke up with Pacino after 15 years was because at that time he had an affair and a child with another woman. John Tarrant, the other named Pacino, deeply regretted loving. 4. John Tarrant, the most wrong love. During the years he was in love with Diane, he met Jan Tarrant, a young, passionate acting coach. They met in a classroom talking about the craft, about the fears that haunted actors on stage. And somehow, a different kind of feeling began to take root. Diane knew. She didn't blame him. She simply walked away. "You need freedom more than a home," she said softly one afternoon as they parted, her voice so low that Pacino could only hear the wind passing by. His relationship with John Tarrant brought him a turning point. In 1989, John gave birth to his first daughter, Julie Marie Pacino. Al stood outside the delivery room, his hands trembling from the weight of fatherhood for the first time. But his heart was still uncertain, unsure whether what he held was truly love. Soon after, the relationship between him and Jan faded quickly. They separated the same year Julie was born. Pacino rarely spoke about John Tarrant afterward, silently taking responsibility as a father and pouring all his love into his daughter. In an interview when asked about that time, he simply said, "I'm not good at relationships. I hurt a lot of people, maybe even myself." 5. Lindell Hobbs, the woman who saved Pacino from his own darkness. After breaking up with John, Tarrant Al Pacino fell into a long void. He kept working, still one of Hollywood's greatest actors. But deep down, he felt himself drifting away from everything warm and ordinary in life. It was during this time that he met Lindell Hobbs, an Australian director with confidence, vitality, and a bold spirit. They had crossed paths briefly at a Los Angeles party in the early 1980s. But nearly a decade later, after both had weathered life's bruises, they truly entered each other's lives. Lindell Hobbs was different from the women before her. She was articulate, sharp, and had her own distinctive view of art. As a director, she understood the loneliness behind the scenes and the brutal nature of acting. Perhaps that was why Pacino found in her a sense of empathy he had rarely felt before. In the early days, they would spend hours in a small Beverly Hills apartment talking about movies, about roles, and about the fear of growing old while still being alone. Pacino once told her, half-jokingly, "You know what? Sometimes I just want to be a normal person, not always acting." Their relationship lasted throughout the early 1990s. Hobbs once described Pacino as a complicated man, sometimes warm, sometimes ice-cold. He loved with intensity, but always kept an invisible distance, as if afraid that getting too close would make everything collapse. Even so, Lindell stayed by his side for years, accepting the ups and downs of a man constantly consumed by film sets and the emotions demanded by his roles. But like many of his previous loves, their differences eventually became an unbridgeable gap. Lindell Hobbs wanted a real home, wanted children, while Pacino was never ready for that. She once said, "He can give his soul to a role, but he's terrified of giving his life to a person." When he heard that Pacino stayed silent, he knew she was right, and he knew it meant they couldn't continue together. When Lindell decided to adopt a child, Pacino supported her, but remained distant. The relationship gradually cooled, and they quietly broke up in the mid-1990s. No statements, no drama. Years later, Lindell said in an interview, "Al is a great man, but he doesn't belong to anyone. I thought I could change that, but no one can." 6. Beverly D'Angelo, the woman who gave him a family. Pacino's love stories didn't end there. In the mid-1990s, he met Beverly D'Angelo, an American actress known for her gentle beauty and intelligent eyes. From the start, they seemed to find solace in each other. Beverly brought Pacino the sense of family he had never known. She was not only a lover, but also a companion. Someone who understood both the moments he lost himself in a role and those when he wanted to hide from the world. Pacino, who had once declared that marriage was a luxury he didn't dare step into, seemed for the first time to consider having children, having a home. D'Angelo later recalled, "He told me if not now, then I'll never have a family." And indeed, in 2001, they welcomed twins Anton James and Olivia Rose, the embodiment of love and Pacino's rare moment of courage. But once the children were born, that love began to change. Pacino, with his perfectionist and private nature, became more controlling in family life. Beverly, independent and strong-willed, felt confined in a role she had never wanted to endure. Slowly, small conflicts grew into distance. She once said in an interview, "He wants everything his way, even love." Meanwhile, Pacino felt misunderstood, trapped in a life of too many responsibilities and too little freedom, the very thing he feared most. In 2003, they split. It was not a peaceful separation. Pacino and D'Angelo even went to court over custody of their children. The media buzzed with headlines like, "Pacino takes twins, mom to court." But in the end, both chose silence. Beverly admitted, "We both love our children in our own way. We just couldn't love each other anymore." Later, when the storm passed, they found peace as co-parents. They were no longer lovers, but raised Anton and Olivia together. On rare occasions, Pacino was seen walking beside D'Angelo and their kids. No spotlight, no performance. Beverly once told People magazine, "Whatever happens, he's still the father of my children, and that's forever." Savon Lucila Sola, the 40-year age gap love. Al Pacino has always been irresistibly charming because right after Beverly, he found himself involved with Lucila Sola, a beautiful Argentine actress nearly 40 years his junior. They met through a mutual friend in Los Angeles. And though their age difference drew skepticism, the two discovered a rare connection. Lucila once said, "When I talk to him, I forget we belong to different generations." As for Pacino, when asked about her, he simply smiled and said, "She makes me feel young again." They appeared together at many events, hand in hand, like true companions. Sometimes Lucila brought along her daughter Camila to meet Pacino. He loved Camila like his own child. And later, when she dated Leonardo DiCaprio, Pacino remained close like a second father. Yet their relationship wasn't without cracks. Pacino, in his 70s, was accustomed to solitude and freedom, while Lucila still craved new experiences, travels, and roles. We loved each other, but we lived differently. Lucila said in an interview in Buenos Aires, Pacino, though deeply in love, had never been one to stay bound for long. They were together, but never lived under the same roof, each keeping their own space. And that distance slowly became the reason their love faded. When they broke up in 2018, Lucila said gently, "We're still family, still friends. It's just that chapter is closed." Pacino didn't speak publicly, but friends said he was downcast for months afterward. In a rare interview, when asked about Lucila, he simply replied, "She's part of my life. Some things, once they've existed, can never truly be lost." What do you think of this love story? Now let's move on to Pacino's most recent romance with another stunning actress, Noor Alfallah Said. Noor Alfallah, the romance that bloomed at 82 and still gave Pacino a child when Al Pacino turned 82. People thought he had already lived through every rise and fall of love. But then Noor Alfallah appeared, a young film producer barely 30 carrying a beauty that blended the allure of the Middle East with the glamour of Hollywood. They met through friends between film parties and conversations about cinema, where Pacino, a man who had lived his whole life under the spotlight, found in Noor a refreshing new energy. And Noor, with an admiring gaze, saw in him the depth and wisdom that youth rarely possesses. Their relationship began quietly and was only discovered by the media in April 2022. The world was stunned. Pacino at 82, Noor only 29. A 54-year age gap dividing two generations. Yet between them, time seemed meaningless. In June 2023, Noor gave birth to his son, Roman Pacino. At 83, Al Pacino spoke about fatherhood with a rare, gentle smile. "I've had children before, but this one feels different, because it came at a time I never expected." People saw him walking hand in hand with Noor, looking like a young man experiencing fatherhood for the first time. For Noor, Roman was not just the fruit of love, but also the bond that tied two generations together. But like all of Pacino's romances, differences eventually emerged. Noor was young, dynamic, and drawn to travel and new projects, While Pacino preferred quiet nights spent watching old films, they still cared for each other, but their love slowly evolved into a deep friendship. By the end of 20 till 23, they parted peacefully, as the media put it. Now, in his twilight years, Al Pacino remains alone in his vast home, where old photographs and the echoes of films are his only companions. Throughout his life, he loved many women, each leaving a distinct mark, a private sky. But none stayed long enough to walk with him to the end. The passionate romances have faded. The thunderous applause of performances has given way to silence and memory. So what has Al Pacino's life truly been like? How did he build his remarkable career? Alfredo James. Pacino was born on April 25, 1940, in East Harlem, New York, into a working-class Italian-Armenian family. From those humble beginnings, he rose to become one of the greatest icons of modern cinema. With his deep gaze, growly voice, and raw emotional intensity, Pacino quickly secured his place among the golden generation of 1970s Hollywood. His journey from the streets of New York to the pinnacle of artistry stands as a testament to perseverance and the hunger to transcend limits. In his early years, Pacino was profoundly shaped by the vibrant energy of New York, a city that fueled his authentic, lifelike acting style. From 1966 to 1969, he studied at Lee Strasberg's actor studio, where the philosophy of method acting would define his entire career. During this period, his role in the Indian, Once the Bronx, earned him the prestigious Obie Award, opening the door to film. In 1971, Pacino made his big screen debut in The Panic in Needle Park, playing a heroin addict in New York. His raw, unflinching performance stunned critics and caught the eye of director Francis Ford Coppola. Coppola would later cast him as Michael Corleone in The Godfather, a choice the studio initially resisted, but one that ultimately changed the course of film history. The Godfather 1972 catapulted Pacino to global stardom. His portrayal of Michael Corleone, a good-hearted son turned ruthless mafia don, became an enduring symbol of the tragedy of power. The role earned him his first Oscar nomination and opened the door to a string of brilliant performances. In 1983, Pacino embodied Tony Montana in Brian De Palma's Scarface, one of the most iconic characters of his career. Tony, a daring Cuban immigrant turned drug lord, was both brutal and tragic. They tell you what to do, what to think. Do you want to live like a sheep? That line etched itself into pop culture, making Tony Montana a rebel symbol of the 1980s. Though controversial at first, Scarface became a classic, and Pacino was celebrated for his fierce, visceral transformation. The late 1980s brought challenges. After a series of highs, Pacino stumbled when Revolution 1985 flopped. He nearly withdrew from film, returning to theater to find balance and inspiration. But his passion for acting never waned. In 1989, he made a triumphant return with Sea of Love, a romantic crime thriller that re-established his connection with audiences raw, yet tender. In 1990, Pacino reprised his role in The Godfather Part 3, closing the tragic arc of Michael Corleone. Though the film received mixed reviews, his performance remained its emotional core. 2 years later, he reached a new peak, with Scent of a Woman playing the blind, abrasive, yet honorable Colonel Frank Slade. The role earned Pacino his long-awaited first Oscar, marking a golden milestone in his career. That same year, he received another Oscar nomination for Glengarry Glen Ross, proving his reigns yet again. As a weary real estate salesman, crushed by greed and disillusionment, Pacino exposed the human tragedy behind ambition. His ability to turn ordinary men into symbols of an era was unmatched. In 1995, Heat brought Pacino and Robert De Niro face-to-face on screen for the first time. Under Michael Mann's direction, they portrayed two men on opposite sides of the law cop and criminal who paradoxically understood each other deeply. The cafe scene between them became a masterclass in acting, cementing Pacino's legacy as a master of emotion and restraint. Entering the 21st century, Pacino continued to shine in both film and television. In Insomnia, 2002, he portrayed a detective tormented by guilt and fatigue. His HBO projects like Angels in America, 2003, and You Don't Know Jack, 2010, won him Emmy Awards, reaffirming his creative vitality. In 2019, he returned in Martin Scorsese's The Irishman alongside Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci as Jimmy Hoffa. Pacino crafted a character both defiant and deeply human, earning another Oscar nomination and connecting with a new generation. The Irishman served as a quiet epilogue about aging power and the cost of loyalty, summing up over half a century of his legendary career. In the 2020s, Al Pacino showed no signs of slowing down. He starred in Amazon's Hunters, playing a Holocaust survivor, leading a group hunting Nazis in 1970s America. The role allowed Pacino to explore the depths of guilt, resilience, and justice. Even at 80, he chose projects carefully treating acting not as a glorious past, but as an ever-evolving craft. In the early 2000s, Pacino faced a lull with films like 88 Minutes and Righteous Kill, which received mixed reviews. His once commanding voice and fiery expressions, his signature traits, were now deemed over the top. Yet time has given audiences a fairer lens to appreciate him. Martin Scorsese. The Irishman, 2019, reaffirmed that Pacino remains one of the greatest living actors. His portrayal of Jimmy Hoffa was both explosive and poignant, earning him renewed Oscar recognition. Even in his later years, Pacino remains passionate, conflicted, unyielding. He once said, "I quit cigarettes long ago, but I still smoke cigars just for fun." That simple line encapsulates his life philosophy. Between discipline and indulgence, art and life, he always chooses authenticity. Behind the dazzling lights and roaring applause, Pacino has fought a quiet battle for decades. His struggle with smoking. In Hollywood's golden age, cigarettes were almost part of an artist's identity, symbols of strength, rebellion, and charisma. Pacino, with his intense eyes and cool demeanor, wielded cigarettes like extensions of his soul. From ruthless gangsters to lonely drifters. But times changed. As smoking's dangers were exposed, that once glorified image lost its allure. The gritty masculinity that made Pacino an icon was now viewed as a relic of the past. Public pressure forced him and a generation of actors to confront habits once romanticized as style. Eventually, Pacino quit, yet he still allows himself the occasional cigar, just for fun. As he once said, that simple confession reflects his philosophy. Never extreme, never denying small joys, only learning to keep them in balance. Like in his art, he doesn't seek perfection. He seeks harmony within his contradictions. Still, not all periods of his life were serene. In 2015, Pacino became entangled in a lawsuit with his longtime agency, International Creative Management, over commission disputes. He was accused of unpaid fees from film income. However, the case was quietly settled and did not tarnish his reputation. Looking back on Al Pacino's life, it is clear he has had it all: fame, talent, wealth, and the love of extraordinary women who crossed his path. Diane Keaton, John Tarrant, Lindell Hobbs, Beverly D'Angelo, Lucila Sola, and Noor Alfallah. Each left a unique emotional imprint. Yet perhaps because he loved too deeply, lived too intensely, and always placed art above all else, Pacino never truly belonged to anyone. At 85, he remains alone beneath the stage lights, where his passion for acting still burns. But when the curtain falls, only the quiet sigh of a man who has known every shade of love. yet still remains lonely, lingers. What is your perspective on this? Do you feel empathy for this man, a living legend whose heart has seemingly never found peace? Share your thoughts below. We invite you to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel to explore more untold stories behind Hollywood's glory, where sometimes loneliness is the price of greatness.